Welcome to the Full FX Unfiltered. My name is Colin Lambert. I'm publisher of the Full FX, and this edition is in association with Quantile. And I'm delighted to be joined by Esben Urbak, who is head of product at Quantile. Esben, lovely to see you. Quantile is a name that probably has come up on more people's radars in the last year, in particular, as regulation has started to impact our markets. Can you tell us a little bit about the journey that Quantile's been on to get to this point?
Definitely. So we actually started back in 2017 because we thought there was a better way to do optimization and more value we could create for customers in that space. And so over the last 6-7 years, we got a big network of not just global banks, but also regional banks and buy sides. We do optimization in two core services. So compression, which I won't talk too much about today because I think most of the guys that read Full FX look more at counterparty risk. So our other service is counterparty risk. And that service is really about reducing your exposure in the case of stress in the market or default. But as you can imagine, a lot of our participants also very much focus on the resources that these take up and reducing those so you have a much more efficient business and running that business.
Yeah, and I guess obviously the trigger for it was probably UMR?
Yes, so really actually back in 2017, we actually thought going out doing it with capital would be a better idea because that incorporates all trades and all asset classes. But talking to banks back then, as you can imagine, everybody was really focused on UMR and the cost. So we changed focus, and so we built up a very successful margin optimization service. And today we optimize within FX, rates, and equity.
I'm vaguely aware of those other two markets. I hear they exist.
I'll stay on the FX side, don't worry. So if we take FX as an example, we run that on a weekly basis, basically because that's a very volatile asset class. So to get the most benefit and stay as low as possible in margin space, you need to run it very frequently. But overall, the process is highly efficient. It just takes 5 hours. We get all the risk and stuff from Acadia directly in, so participants don't have to give us that. The only thing participants have to give us are the constraints they want to put on the optimizer, like essentially the maximum change you want in risk, in what trades you want to put on. And once they've done that, we run the optimization, we give a proposal, everybody can validate it, sign it off. Once it's signed off, we STP the trade straight in to participants' books. And FX is a very good example where we achieve very good results. So we often see an excess of 50% reduction. But of course, depending on the constraints you put on the optimizer, it can be somewhat less. Yeah. So on average, I would say it's about 35%. Okay.
So the fact is, it is still actually a significant saving.
I think it's a very good result, but I'm biased.
Yeah, there is that too. Yeah, but I mean, especially though in an era when you've got interest rates on the rise, it becomes even more important.
And we have seen a growing interest over the last year, particularly from both regional banks and also buy side, because the costs are now so much higher in the last year.
And more of them are coming in scope of the regulations.
But another thing we're seeing a lot from banks, particularly, is a big interest in capital now. So over the last 2 years, that's really where we tried to build out another optimization service in conjunction with that. And that's really due to SACA being introduced in 2021. And you saw the capital and the resources that take up at banks increase dramatically. But I think also as an optimizer, what was really nice was that SACA is a risk-centric model where it's really prime for optimization, whereas the older capital models were more notional based, so it was more compression and that kind of thing. So we've there built out a service as well, focusing on SACA initially. Yeah. But I would say today it's not just about SACA. We really try to broaden the scope, and we've introduced SACA leverage, SACA RWA, but also internal method model, stress scenarios, etc., to attract and also add value to banks that are not within SACA. And maybe it's worth just highlighting here that we don't have to have symmetry across the network. We can optimize some banks that are SACA against banks that are IMM, get good results for both. And the IMM banks and the stress scenario banks, we can really tailor the models to fit their internal ones because each model is quite different at each bank. And that has meant we've been able to get very good results just for these banks that are not SACA, but also expand the network and give much better results for the SACA banks themselves.
Yeah. Something I did want to talk to you about is it's been an interesting. My relationship with clearing has been interesting, I think is how we'll put it. I don't buy everything needs to be cleared in foreign exchange. And that's why I'm quite fascinated with smart clearing, which is something you've done a recent proof of concept on with ForexClear.
Yes.
Can you talk to us about what smart clearing is and why you developed it?
Yeah, so we started about 18 months. We've been developing with ForexClear. The idea is really about novating FX trades or risk via new trades into the clearinghouse to achieve counterparty risk reductions, but certainly also resource reduction across both cleared and bilateral.
Yeah.
And really, a nutshell is about getting all the benefits of clearing without necessarily getting the cost, or certainly limiting the cost like margin.
Yeah.
Because as you know, FX clearing has really lagged compared to interest rate.
Yeah.
I think the main reason is because of there's never been a mandate to clear, but also in UMR space, FX forwards have been exempt. So the cost versus benefits has always been sort of in a bit of a balance. And it was probably seen as too expensive in the past. But with SACA, I think that has really tipped it in favor of clearing.
Yeah.
As long as you can control the margin.
Yeah.
So what we are really looking to do here is then, in an intelligent way, put risk into the clearinghouse if it makes sense to get all of those benefits, but control all the negatives of sort of margin, etc.
Yeah. So how does it then work in terms of, how flexible is it? Because some people might say, well, yeah, these trades can go into the clearinghouse, but these can't. And other people might say, well, all my trades should really go in there. How does it kind of work, and how do you account for because I think one of the problems with clearing and FX in the past has been the huge variety of tenors that are traded. Literally pretty much every day.
Yeah, so basically that's where Quantile comes in, right? So firstly, we take and look at your starting position on the bilateral side and the cleared side. We then take all the trades that you have, and then we calculate the capital of each trade and margin on the bilateral side and the cleared side. So just to take a step back, the benefits you would get from each trade of moving them into the clearinghouse on the capital side will be from the marginal period of risk reduction, the STM treatment, and also that the risk weight at the clearinghouse is significantly lower. So we see on each trade going from for example, a risk weight against a party somewhere between 20 to 100, but then when we move it to the clearinghouse, we drop that down to 2%. So we calculate that on every single trade and then look to see which portfolio, scan through all of those trades or all of those risks, can we move in and then get it. The ones where we deem it not favorable, we will leave it. The ones where we do, we will move it into it.
Okay, so the decision is kind of made at Quantile level in terms of how this works best within the parameters given to you by the clients.
So this is highly customizable, right? So each participant can give us what risk can we maximum move, what trades, what currency pairs, what resources can we increase, how much margin can we increase in the clearinghouse. So it's very flexible, and it is Quantile controlling it, but it is just us setting up the problem, and the optimizer will then find it very quickly. Yeah. And the thing here probably to bring up, which I find very interesting, but optimization makes me excited. So the thing that you might say, SACA is a risk measure, right? As I said earlier, and it tries to calculate the capital depending on the risk. The clearinghouse margin model is a risk measure. So how can we move any capital into the clearinghouse? Because they're both trying to measure risk. So if I move a lot of risk into the clearinghouse, you could imagine the margin increasing. Now, the reason for that is really a difference in model. So the SACA model in particular is very siloed. So each hedging set, each currency pair is separate. There's no correlation, there's no offset. Yeah. So you can imagine you are long euros, short Canadian dollars. Yeah. And in capital world, they're treated completely separate. So moving those into the clearinghouse, you could see a reduction. But in the clearinghouse, you then have to look at as a portfolio, historical analysis, expected shortfall kind of thing, VAR kind of measures. And if we weight them correctly, or the optimizer weight them correctly, we can create solutions where they offset each other in the margin world, the CCP model, and therefore do not increase the risk on a portfolio level. Okay. And we therefore see no margin increase. Yeah. And we see we can see significant capital decreases.
Yes.
The other thing that the optimizer does very nicely, and definitely one of the reasons why we need an optimizer, is that if we just blindly move this whole portfolio of FX forwards in, you could see massive margin increases like I just talked about, but you could also see capital increases. So if you, for example, have an exotic portfolio where you're long and you have a FX forward or any other FX trade that you could clear that is short, they're sort of offsetting each other in Saka world. Yep. If you just blindly move that forward into the clearinghouse, you could see the capital increase on the bilateral side and potentially also on the cleared side. So it's those kind of calculations that has to be done within seconds and find the best possible solution. That is what we can do.
Could this have been done 3 years ago? Was the technology available? I mean, it seems quite a big advance in 6 years to get to the stage we're at now. I mean, has the advance in technology actually helped drive this?
Definitely. So our optimizations has definitely become faster, better, more powerful ever since we started, right? And we built out stronger and more powerful algorithms, and that has definitely helped us. And this one is probably one of the most advanced optimization we do, because it's not just about getting the best capital solution. It's also about controlling margin, taking into account settlement risk, breaches or constraints at the clearinghouse. It's also about PVs. So you can imagine if you have a trade that's on a euro CSA, you move it on to a dollar CSA at the clearinghouse, there's a PV change. We need to control that. We don't want to give our participants negative P&L by participating in this. And then all of these very flexible and customizable constraints that each participant has to be taken into account. So it becomes a massive problem that we have to solve extremely fast in order for participants to be happy with it.
I mentioned earlier you fairly recently, I mean, it's becoming further back in the past, you've run a proof of concept. Can you sort of give us a high level feel for the results of that, you know, in terms of the benefits of smart clearing?
Yeah, so we've run two. One is probably just a year ago now, and then the second one was the bigger one we ran in the spring, which was with 13 banks, 19 entities. The banks submitted trades that could be novated of about $4 trillion worth of notional. And the interesting bit here is that we novated only 3 trillion of that, which really shows that the optimizer picks the trades that should be moved from a resource perspective. Yeah. So it left 1 trillion on the table on the bilateral side because either it hedged existing positions.
It's just a trillion.
It's just a trillion. And it either hedged existing capital positions or moving it into the clearinghouse was just too costly from a margin perspective. Yeah. And out of that 3 trillion as well, we could actually compress more than 70% of it. Both half of that was outright, just long shorts on the same day, and the other was using slightly risky compression.
Yeah, yeah.
But the main result, of course, is capital here, and we saw on average more than 50% reduction in capital for each participant. So across the network, it was about 500 billion worth of effective notional. So really significant results that we really think are very good. And on the back of that, I think that got quite a lot of the participants excited, which means that they've invested money in the build, the technology build. And so I wanted to be able to say today we've gone live, but actually it's in the next couple of weeks we're going live. Okay. So look out for that.
By the time this comes out, you may be live. We'll keep an eye on.
We have a few banks participating that are going live in November, and then in 2024 we have quite a nice pipeline of banks building to it and getting ready for.
Okay. I mean, it's always nice when you do see these, you know, conceptual ideas actually come to fruition, actually start operating in the market, because we have a lot of good ideas in the world. They don't all necessarily get to market, which is sometimes a shame. sometimes it's not. I guess just to close out then, Esben, how far into the journey do you think we are when it comes to, the smart clearing and our optimization and our better use of capital? How far are we into that journey, and where do you think the innovations are going to come from next?
So I think we're just at the beginning, right? So as part of the POC, we did a lot of analysis to see like where are we going, what is the actual path for smart clearing, and also for everything. And so one of the things that are very interesting is that at the moment there is clearing happening, but it's a small fraction of the market, right? So as we build up more and more risk in the clearinghouse, moving a diversified portfolio into a bigger diversified portfolio makes the optimization work better, because the margins offsets of moving trades in is much more easily achieved, and you can actually get margin decreases by doing this, whereas at the moment we're just constraining it. So doing scenarios mimicking that, we see that the optimization results, the capital results, can increase by 10 to 15%. And looking at it in a different way, the people that participate in the POC that already have risk in the clearinghouse actually saw in the POC itself about 60% reduction in capital, which shows it as well. The second thing where I think we can really see big jumps in results is symmetric data. So the banks and participants are generally still in a stage where the data is quite messy. And we often see that they don't necessarily always even agree whether they're long or short, whether they have positions. So doing scenarios with that where we make it symmetric across every bank, we actually see the results jump by 20% points. So those two things can really increase the results just from improving everything and getting risk into the clearinghouse. The long-term journey is, of course, building this out not just to the global 13, 14 banks, but to the 20, 30, 50 market participants that could benefit from this.
Yeah, on both sell and buy side.
Exactly. So I think there's huge potential for including buy side as well, or regional banks, etc. But maybe just to finish off, like Quantile's aim will always be to look at it holistically. So that is part of what smart clearing is, right? It's putting the trades and the risk where they make most sense. So whether that is keeping them bilateral, moving them into the clearinghouse, moving into swap agent, moving them somewhere else, or putting risk overlays, that will always be Quantile's aim in order to achieve the best possible results for the clients, for the participants in the network.
Well, I mean, I wish you luck in it, because I obviously the foreign exchange market is dear to my heart, and I have been a little concerned about this impact of regulation over the years as it's grown and grown. Would it dramatically impact liquidity in the market? I think the kind of work you're doing means it won't be, which is great. So, Esben, thanks very much for your time today. Thanks everyone for watching, and we'll be back again very soon.